Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about my favorite book tropes. So, if you don't know what a trope is in a book, it's essentially a very commonly used either plot device or character role. For example, the first one I have is the chosen one. This is something that is in a lot of different fantasy stories especially. It's something that gets constantly used in different ways, which is why it is now a trope. And that's just going to start off this video because the chosen one is one of my favorite tropes. I love it. And now that is not to say that I always love all of these tropes I'm going to talk about. There are definitely some books that I think could serve as the exception to some of these favorite tropes where they're just not done as well as I would hope to see, but typically if these tropes are in a book, I'm gonna really enjoy it. So the chosen one, the one who is prophesized to save them all, the one who has certain powers that is somehow destined to save or destroy the evil. I love this stuff. Books that do this especially well, in my opinion, are books like Malice, which has an amazing chosen one trope. Red Sister, I think, has a really fun chosen one trope. Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, I think, is excellent for this, as well as Lightbringer, so The Black Prism by Brent Weeks, I think has a really interesting take on the chosen one trope. All of these books have a main character who is supposed to be the one to vanquish evil or bring balance or be the savior. I love it. I love this stuff. It's like wish fulfillment in my mind. I want to be the chosen one in a fantasy book, so I love reading about it. I love it. I love putting myself in the chosen one's shoes and feeling like I'm the chosen one while I'm reading that book. I love it. So give me all the chosen one. I never get tired of it. I will say that there are some books I've read where they have a chosen one that I don't particularly love. It's not just an always thing that I'm going to love it, but typically everywhere I read it, I just adore it. The next trope that I absolutely adore is the mentor trope. The wise old mentor, or the animal companion mentor, or whatever the mentor shape takes. I love it. I love when our chosen one or one of our main characters has to depend on the help of someone who's done it before, someone who's been there, done that, washed up, retired, whatever the case may be. I love this stuff. Lord of the Rings is just like the classic example for this, with Gandalf being our mentor figure who's just fantastic. I love Gandalf. The other book that I recently read that I thought did this really well was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This one had a mentor type figure in it, and I really enjoyed that relationship, that particular character. Really enjoyed it. It was so good. Other books that do this type of mentor trope pretty darn well include The Final Empire or The First Mistborn in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. It's not the typical mentor that you think of where it's like the wise old wizard, but there is a mentor type figure who leads our main character down this path and is excellent, and it's really, really well done. Lots of twists and turns with that particular character. And then of course you have to include things like The Hunger Games, where each of the different tributes had a mentor that they relied on. Haymitch is classic. I love Haymitch. So any of these books, the mentor is just one of my favorite things. I love it. I love this trope so much. Every time I've read it, I've really enjoyed it. The next trope might be a more unpopular opinion, and it could be done super well, or it might be done a little lazily, and it's the here comes the cavalry trope. I love this trope in fantasy. Sarah J. Maas is known for doing this type of here comes the cavalry to save the day at the last minute, where it was like all of these inner workings that we didn't necessarily see on the page are finally paying off. All these political maneuverings are finally paying off in this big way. I love that kind of stuff. It can come off though as unearned if you don't kind of lay the groundwork for that ending. Another book that comes to mind is The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, of course. There's a particular battle where this is very, very important, and I loved it. Another one that I think of is not necessarily from the books that I think of it, but it was from the TV show for the books, and that was Game of Thrones. There is a particular battle in one of the very later seasons where it seems like all hope is lost for our main heroic character, and then at the last second, everything is saved, and it's just fantastic. I love this kind of stuff. I love it. I love the Here Comes the Cavalry, where we see the army coming down the big hillside to save the day, and you're like, yes! I love that kind of stuff. So Here Comes the Cavalry, if it's done right, I really enjoy it. Another trope I absolutely adore is inanimate objects taking on personalities. Two books really come to mind for this one, and it's Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett and Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Both of these make use of inanimate objects taking on their own personalities and stealing the show. Every scene that these inanimate objects are in completely steal the show, take away focus from all the other characters because they're just so fantastic. I love this. I love it. I love it so, so much. If you know of any other books that have this trope, please let me know because I want to read more with inanimate objects taking on personalities. I think it's great. Another trope that's actually typically seen more in sci-fi rather than fantasy is artificial intelligence also taking on its own personality. So things like Illuminae, where we have this artificial intelligence character that starts making decisions and you don't know if they're for good or for evil, and it's really fascinating to explore the idea of artificial intelligence starting to make decisions for humans on behalf of humans and whether they make the right ones or not. Another book that does this extremely well is Thunderhead, which is the second book in the Scythe trilogy. Oh my goodness, those two books really come to mind. Another one that I'm going to be reading soon that I think I'm going to love based off of my reading taste is The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I really think I'm gonna love this because this particular artificial intelligence robot has a very sarcastic personality, which just sounds so great. So that trope, when done well, I also adore. I love the philosophical questions that get brought up when we start bringing in artificial intelligence into the story and it starts making decisions for humans and interprets these decisions in different ways than humans would. I think it's fascinating. Going back to another trope that can be pretty much found in any story, any genre, is the found family trope. I don't know anyone who doesn't like the found family trope. This is where our characters group together because they're just the best of friends. They're not necessarily blood-related family members, but they've found this family because they either lost touch with their own families or they're orphaned or whatever it may be. Things like Mistborn, again, have an amazing found family. Foundryside also has an amazing found family. The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater is another one that comes to mind. Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson has an incredible found family. And then other books outside of the fantasy genre that come to mind include things like This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger is amazing for found family. So if you like the found family trope, I would check any of those out. I recommend all of them very highly. Another trope that I love is a good anti-hero trope. So this kind of has to do with morally gray characters where our main character, isn't necessarily heroic, but they're doing things that make them the hero in their own mind, or doing things that are not necessarily evil that you can somehow get behind. They're not the traditional hero. They're not doing things that you can necessarily agree with fully, but you can see their reasoning and get behind them and root for them anyway. Characters like Lotta in the Conqueror's Saga, which is starting with And I Darken by Kiersten White. She is such a fantastic anti-hero. I love Lotta so much. She is definitely not the good, heroic, righteous character that you can like root for and get behind everything she does. You just love her because she's super flawed, but she gets what she wants. She goes after what she wants. She doesn't take crap from anybody. I love that. A great example is also Vicious and Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. Characters like Victor, who definitely don't do necessarily the best things in their life. They don't necessarily have the most heroic actions in their past, but somehow you're still rooting for them regardless, and you just want the best for them, even if you don't necessarily agree with all of the actions that they're taking. Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, Rin, is another one where you're like, girl, what are you doing? But somehow I'm rooting for you and I can somehow see where you're coming from. Those sorts of characters I just absolutely love. Glokta from the First Law trilogy is another one who you're like, this guy's a torturer, why am I rooting for him? I love this stuff. I love it. I love all of these characters that are the anti-heroes. A couple other tropes that are a little bit more common in other genres, like thrillers, for example, would be the unreliable narrator, where you start to get books like Bad Mommy by Taryn Fisher. You start to talk about books like Final Girls by Riley Sager. These are unreliable narrators either because they are purposely misleading you in the story, misleading you to think things are a certain way when they're really not, either because they have secret motivations for doing so or because they genuinely don't remember things appropriately or their mind has been altered in some way. Another one that comes to mind is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, where our main character is an alcoholic, so a lot of the events that take place she doesn't remember clearly, and you don't know if you can trust her. You don't know if she's telling you the truth because she doesn't know herself. Another book that could also be included in this is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, which is one of my favorite thrillers. Any books with unreliable narrators, I typically really like. I like being misdirected one way and not knowing if I can trust my narrator or my main character whatsoever, either because they have had their mind altered or they're doing it on purpose for reasons. Another trope that I see a lot in thrillers, but are also in other books as well, is memory lapses. This is a trope that does need to be, in my mind, well done, in like my own opinion, well done, not objectively well done, because I don't know what's objectively well done for memory lapses, but books like, again, Final Girls, where our character has gone through something traumatic and is purposely blocking out what happened because she doesn't want to remember. Other books like Dark Places by Gillian Flynn has this memory lapse trope in it. You also have books like What Alice Forgot by Liane Moriarty, which is definitely more of a romance contemporary type book. And then it extends even into fantasy at times, where you have a character who experiences memory lapses in Way of Kings, and it's really well done. These types of things, when done right, in my opinion, introduce such an intriguing mystery element to the story that I desperately want to find out more about. And it has to be done in a way that's realistic and isn't done just to give the author an easy way out from revealing too much at once. Like, we have to have reasons behind why these memory lapses would actually be affecting these characters in these ways, rather than it just being, oh, to build the mystery. When it's done right, I really like it. Like Final Girls, I thought was really well done. Dark Places, another one that the character was a child and experienced something overly traumatic and has maybe misremembered details, so you're not totally sure whether or not you can trust their memory. Things like Way of Kings, where something happened in one of these characters' past that he has wanted to completely block out and get rid of, and and you're building up this mystery behind these characters and you're getting these slow reveals to answer your questions. I like that stuff when it's done right. Last one I have for this video is forbidden romance. So I have found that I'm starting not to love contemporary romance type novels because I very often find that the conflict between the two characters that the romance is taking place between very often comes internally from their relationship. It's internal conflicts, things like miscommunication, which I feel like everyone hates, instead of these external conflicts that are keeping them apart that they have to overcome. A book that does forbidden romance, in my opinion, so darn well is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This book has insta-love in it, but for some reason I loved it so much because the two main characters that fall in love, there's nothing wrong with their relationship. They just fall head over heels so beautifully in love, and there's no internal conflict. There's no like miscommunication between them. They're very open, and it's these external conflicts that are keeping them apart. Things like Romeo and Juliet, it's a classic type of trope where you want the main characters to be together, but the world is trying to keep them apart. I love this so much more than miscommunication being the reason our characters can't get together. Like, please, really, forbidden romance for me just makes it so that you can root for the characters and you just want them to be together despite all the odds. I love it. I love it. So that is one thing that I've noticed reading more and more. Books with romance in them or contemporary romances really want more of those external conflicts that are keeping them apart. I don't want the internal like miscommunication or I did something in my past and you can't see past it or whatever the case may be. I want more of the forbidden romance. So that's all I've got for you today. What is your favorite book trope? Leave that comment down below. I would love to know. My next video that I'm doing is going to be my least favorite tropes. So that should be very, very fun. I'm really looking forward to doing that. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and until next time, bye!